The massive hangar doors opened with a soft groan, revealing a sleek, silver ship that had just landed on the training grounds of Earth's elite military base. The air buzzed with excitement and tension as the alien students slowly disembarked, their eyes wide with wonder. These were no ordinary students. They were the brightest minds from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, handpicked to learn from humanity's most feared warriors, the Deathworlders. The humans had agreed to host these young aliens, but it was clear that the Earth's military wasn't going to treat them with kid gloves. The aliens had traveled for months to get here, crossing vast stretches of space to witness the legendary human training techniques. But what they didn't know was that their training experience was going to challenge everything they thought they knew about warfare, survival, and fear. As the last alien stepped off the ramp, they gathered in front of a row of human instructors. The humans were calm, stoic, and observing, their expressions unreadable. The alien students couldn't help but feel a flutter of anxiety in their stomachs. They had heard stories about the Deathworlders, tales of their raw brutality, their relentless drive, and their ability to survive in environments that would obliterate most other species. Some had even witnessed the ferocity of human combat in distant battles. But now, standing on Earth, they were about to see it firsthand. The alien students wore their homeworld uniforms, brightly colored, adorned with intricate symbols, and glistening with advanced technology. They exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to expect. Some whispered to each other in their native tongues, but their voices were hushed, drowned out by the steady hum of Earth's machinery. A human officer, a woman with short-cropped hair and a sharp, confident gaze, stepped forward. Her uniform was far less extravagant than the students' attire, but it carried an aura of authority that silenced the alien murmurs immediately. She wasn't here to entertain them or make them feel comfortable. She was here to train them, and she would train them hard. "Welcome to Earth," the officer said, her voice clear and firm. "You're here to learn how humans survive and thrive in the harshest conditions known to the universe. I hope you've prepared yourselves for the challenge, because you're about to experience something unlike anything you've ever seen." The aliens were silent. They were eager, yes, but none could deny the uncertainty growing in their minds. These were warriors who had faced countless enemies, conquered entire star systems, and fought in wars that spanned light years. Yet now, they stood on a planet where the humans were known to have won some of the deadliest battles ever fought, not by sheer numbers, but by their will to survive. The officer nodded, as if reading their thoughts. "There's no turning back from here. What you'll see, what you'll experience, will be beyond your understanding. But if you are willing to push yourselves to the limit, you will walk away with something no other species has. Focus. Survival. The ability to adapt to a world where death is a constant companion." A murmur spread among the alien students. Some looked at each other with skepticism, others with intrigue. They had heard that humans were different from the rest of the galaxy's inhabitants. But could they truly be as formidable as the stories claimed? Could their training be something that would shake the foundation of everything these aliens had ever known? As the officer spoke, the students looked around, taking in their surroundings. The base was unlike anything they had ever seen. Advanced machinery whirred in the background, while towering structures loomed above them. The sky was dotted with flying vehicles, and the air itself seemed to hum with energy. But what truly captured their attention was the row of humans standing nearby, all of them carrying weapons, all of them radiating an aura of readiness. They were prepared for anything. "We'll begin tomorrow," the officer continued. "But first, I want you to spend the night thinking about one thing. In the galaxy, you may have heard that humans are reckless, impulsive, and unpredictable. But what you don't understand is that we embrace danger in ways no other species dares. Tomorrow, we'll show you how." With that, the officer turned and walked away, leaving the aliens to process her words. The students exchanged nervous glances, their minds racing. What did she mean? Embrace danger. Live with it. Was that even possible? As the night grew darker, the alien students sat in their quarters, the weight of the officer's words hanging in the air. They had trained for years, honing their skills, mastering combat tactics, and studying alien civilizations, but none of that had prepared them for the challenge they were about to face. One by one, the students tried to sleep, but the excitement and fear were too strong. Their minds were filled with questions. What would tomorrow bring? Would they be able to survive the training that was coming? And most of all, could they match the humans who seemed to thrive in conditions that would break any other species? Little did they know, the next day would mark the beginning of a journey that would test them in ways they could never have imagined. The world of the Deathworlders was brutal, and the aliens were about to discover that surviving there would require more than just skill. It would take something far deeper, something that could only be learned through true focus, through surviving the unimaginable. The stage was set. Tomorrow, the real training would begin, and nothing could prepare the alien students for what was to come. The following morning, the alien students gathered in the vast training arena, their senses heightened with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The air was thick with tension, and the cold breeze of Earth's morning chill only seemed to amplify their unease. They were lined up in neat rows, their colorful uniforms standing out against the gray backdrop of the military compound. The sound of boots echoing against the cold concrete was the only noise that filled the space, besides the occasional crackle of comms in the background. Human soldiers, standing at attention, watched the students closely. These were the Deathworlders, the ones who had faced battles unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They didn't smile, didn't joke, and didn't waste words. Every action was deliberate, every movement measured. The aliens had seen these humans fight, but now they would see them in action up close. The officer from yesterday, the one who had welcomed them with such cold authority, stood before them again. This time, she held a small device in her hand, which hummed softly, its purpose unclear to the alien students. They shifted nervously as she stepped forward, her eyes scanning each of them with precision. "Today is your first test," the officer said. Her voice was as sharp as a blade, cutting through the silence. "It will be unlike anything you have experienced. There will be no safeties, no simulations. You will face live ammo, real obstacles, and real danger. If you survive today, you may be ready for the next phase of training. If not, you will be sent back to your ships." The alien students exchanged uncertain glances. Live ammo. They had heard of it in theory, but had never been subjected to it. Their species had always relied on precision, strategy, and most importantly, distance. Everything in their combat training had been about controlling the battlefield, keeping enemies at arm's length, and using advanced tech to keep them safe. But Earth's Deathworlders were different. They fought up close, in the middle of the chaos, with no fear, and now they would face that chaos themselves. Without waiting for a response, the officer gestured for the students to step forward. She pressed a button on her device, and the ground in front of them shifted. What appeared to be a field of thick grass gave way to a series of large obstacles: concrete walls, steel barricades, and pits that seemed to descend into darkness. The ground was rough, uneven, and filled with sharp, jagged rocks. The aliens stared at the course, their minds racing. This wasn't a training field, it was a battleground. "This is your course," the officer announced. "You'll run it alone, you'll be fired at, and you'll have to adapt to survive. But the goal isn't just to finish, it's to learn. Learn how to push past fear, to work with your instincts, and to survive under pressure. This is how we train on Earth." One by one, the students were signaled to enter the course. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they faced the daunting obstacles ahead. Some looked back, their eyes filled with hesitation, but the officers standing in the background were unyielding. There was no turning back now. The first alien to step forward was a tall, slender being from a peaceful planet far away. Their skin shimmered with hues of green and blue, and their eyes were large and inquisitive. They had always been the calmest of the group, relying on their intelligence and ability to calculate every move. They weren't the strongest, but they believed their intellect would see them through. As soon as they entered the field, a loud crack rang out, followed by the unmistakable sound of a projectile whizzing past their head. A bullet. The aliens' reflexes kicked in, and they ducked instinctively, narrowly avoiding the shot. Another bullet fired, this one missing by inches. The alien moved quickly, darting between obstacles, using the environment for cover. Their mind raced, calculating angles, planning each step. But the human soldiers weren't making it easy. The shots came fast, and the landscape was alive with danger. It was nothing like any training simulation they had ever encountered. The alien tried to think, but their heart pounded in their chest. Sweat began to form on their skin. This wasn't just a test of skill. It was a test of survival. The noise, the unpredictability, the constant threat of death. They had never felt anything like this before. It was chaos in its purest form. Behind them, the other students were watching, some with wide eyes, others already feeling the weight of what they were about to face. They could see the first alien, trying to make it through the course, struggling to adjust to the human way of combat. There was no perfect calculation here, no distance to maintain. The humans trained to fight in the chaos, to react in real time. And it was clear that this was not something the students had expected. The officer watched with cold detachment as the first student advanced. Their every move was being monitored, every misstep recorded. But there was something else, something the students couldn't see. The humans were teaching them more than just how to fight. They were teaching them how to think when the world around them was falling apart. They were teaching them to focus under pressure. As the first alien reached the halfway point of the course, they found themselves face to face with a steel wall. There was no time to climb, no time to think, only to react. And in that moment, the aliens' instincts took over. They leaped, grabbing onto the edge of the wall and pulling themselves up with every ounce of strength they had. But the humans weren't finished yet. As they made their way up, a flash of bright light erupted from the side. A flashbang grenade, meant to disorient and displace. The alien student lost their grip, slipping as the light blinded them. Panic surged, and they fell, their heart racing. In that moment, everything they thought they knew about combat collapsed. They had relied on their intellect, their training, and their technology, but Earth's training demanded something else, a focus, an awareness of the moment. It wasn't about thinking a step ahead. It was about being in the moment. And that realization would change everything. The alien student lay on the cold, rocky ground, the world spinning around them. Their ears rang from the bright flashbang, and their body ached from the fall. For a moment, everything was disoriented, the weight of the challenge pressing down on them. But then something began to settle in their mind. The realization that they were no longer in control. They had always believed that strategy, intellect, and careful planning were the keys to winning a battle. They thought that if they could anticipate every move, counter every attack, they would be untouchable. But here, on Earth, things were different. The humans didn't fight to outthink their enemies. They fought to survive, no matter what. As the students scrambled to their feet, they noticed something they hadn't before. The humans around them weren't just observing. They were watching for mistakes, learning from the student's every move, preparing to strike if the student faltered. This wasn't just a test of physical strength. It was a test of mental resilience. And the alien was starting to realize that surviving this was going to be far harder than they had imagined. Ahead of them, they could see the next obstacle. A series of moving platforms suspended over a deep pit. The alien's mind began to work again, calculating the best way to traverse the platforms. They had been trained to think ahead, to predict the path. But before they could act, a voice crackled through the comms. "Move quickly. They won't wait for you." It was the officer's voice, calm but with an underlying edge of impatience. The alien's eyes snapped to the platforms. They hadn't been designed for careful calculation. They moved unpredictably, designed to throw off even the most well-prepared minds. The alien had to trust their instincts now. There was no time to overthink. Taking a deep breath, the alien launched themselves onto the first platform, barely making the leap as it shifted under their weight. The platform wobbled violently beneath them, but they adjusted their stance and moved swiftly toward the next. Each leap required the alien to ignore the calculations that had guided them for years. They had to focus on nothing but the movement of the platforms and their bodies' reactions to the shifting terrain beneath them. The alien was halfway across when they heard it, a loud crack followed by a swift hiss. A dart shot across the air, narrowly missing their head. They instinctively ducked, their heart pounding in their chest, but they kept moving. The humans weren't going to let them succeed easily. They were being tested not only on their physical skill, but on their ability to react in the heat of the moment. Behind them, the other alien students watched, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. They had never seen anyone train like this before. Their species had been comfortable with technology, had relied on their advanced gadgets and automated systems to fight their battles. But here, it was different. The Earthlings didn't need fancy weapons or machinery to survive. They were the weapons, their bodies and minds honed through countless years of brutal, raw conflict. And so, the students watched as their fellow aliens struggled to make it across the platforms, the threat of another dart always lurking just behind them. The first student's body was soaked in sweat, and their breath came in quick gasps. They were tired, physically and mentally drained. But they couldn't stop now. The course wasn't just a test. It was a wake-up call. The alien had to keep moving. They had to learn to trust themselves and survive on instinct. The platforms began to shift more erratically. One moment, the student thought they had a safe spot to land, only to have the platform tilt violently under them, throwing them off balance. Another dart flew past, grazing their arm. Pain shot through their side, but the alien couldn't afford to stop. The pain was a reminder of what was at stake. They were fighting for more than just their lives now. They were fighting to survive Earth's brutal training and prove that they were worthy of being part of this chaotic world. And then, the unthinkable happened. The platform beneath the aliens' feet snapped, sending them plummeting into the pit below. For a split second, time seemed to slow as they fell, and their mind raced to find a solution. But there was no escape. There was no way to calculate their way out of this. They hit the bottom of the pit with a heavy thud, the impact knocking the wind out of them. For a moment, everything was silent. The student's mind reeled, their body battered and bruised, their pulse racing with fear. But just as quickly as they had fallen, they rose to their feet, their resolve hardening. They weren't finished. They hadn't been beaten yet. They climbed the jagged rocks, using the pain in their side as fuel. Their bodies screamed for rest, but they ignored it. They couldn't afford to stop. The humans had put them through this to teach them a lesson, to push them beyond their limits, to show them that survival wasn't about playing it safe. It was about resilience, adaptability, and pushing forward no matter the cost. As they pulled themselves up, the officer's voice came over the comms again. This time, there was no mockery, no coldness, just a hint of respect. Get up. You've got more to prove. And in that moment, the alien realized something they hadn't before. This wasn't just a test of strength or skill. It was a test of their will to survive. And they would survive. The alien student, heart pounding and body sore, pulled themselves up from the pit. The harsh rocks scraped against their skin, but they didn't flinch. The pain, the exhaustion, the constant threats, it was all part of the trial. Their mind was already processing the next move, but it was harder now. The burn in their muscles, the sting of the dart wound, and the shock of the fall weighed on them. They had never experienced such relentless challenges. In their home galaxy, combat was often calculated, precise, and organized. But this was chaos. The sound of footsteps behind them broke their focus. They turned to see the other students standing at the edge of the platform. Their faces were a mixture of awe, fear, and confusion. They had watched the fall, and their expressions were unsure. Would the students survive this obstacle? Would they even make it past the next one? The alien student didn't want to be seen as weak, especially not in front of the others. Their pride as a warrior, their very identity, was being tested. And though they could feel the fear gnawing at the edges of their consciousness, they knew they had to keep going. This wasn't just about passing a course. It was about understanding something that no alien had ever understood before. Survival. Humans didn't back down from pain or fear. They lived in it. They breathed it. And they didn't stop until the very end. As the student continued climbing, their comms flickered to life. "Keep moving," came the voice of the instructor. It was cold, almost emotionless, but there was a hard edge to it. "Your next test is waiting. Get to it." The alien student climbed the final ledge, a moment of relief washing over them as they reached the top. The first obstacle had been survived, but it had come at a steep price. Their body was a mess of cuts and bruises, and they felt the sting of the pain that would only get worse as time went on. But in the moment, there was no time for rest. The next test was already waiting. Standing in front of the student was a massive wall, towering high above them. It looked almost impossible to scale, with sharp edges and seemingly no handholds. But what caught the alien's attention was the way the wall pulsated, like it was alive. It was the sort of thing that made the alien's heart race with anticipation and dread. This wasn't just another physical obstacle. It was something much more terrifying. "Move," the voice crackled through the comms again. The alien swallowed hard. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they knew one thing for certain. It wasn't going to be easy. The wall. Taking a deep breath, the student approached the wall. Their fingers grazed the surface, and they felt a strange resistance. There was no solid grip, no way to pull themselves up with the ease they were used to. The alien's mind raced, calculating, trying to find a solution. But there was no time for calculations. The wall wasn't meant to be conquered with cleverness or strategy. It was meant to be faced head-on, with the kind of courage the alien wasn't sure they had yet. With a burst of energy, the student pushed off from the ground, launching themselves toward the wall. Their hands found a few narrow grooves to grip, but the surface was slick, almost as if it was fighting back. They pulled themselves higher, inch by inch, their muscles burning with effort. And then the first shockwave hit. The wall rippled violently, and the alien lost their footing. For a moment, they felt weightless, suspended in midair. Time seemed to stretch as they tried to regain control. Then the wall hit back, sending them plummeting once more into the pit below. They hit the ground with a crash. The pain intense, but it was nothing compared to the humiliation they felt. The other students were watching, their eyes wide with disbelief. Could the alien survive this next trial? Could they find a way to make it through? The alien students' breath came in ragged gasps as they pulled themselves to their feet. Their bodies screamed in protest, but they ignored it. There was no room for weakness. The trial was far from over. They had to survive, not just for themselves, but for every student watching, for every soldier who had ever doubted their ability to make it in this world. They stood tall, shaking off the fall, and started again. The resolve. The voice on the comms came again, this time with a subtle change. "You've failed the test, but that doesn't mean you're out. Get back up and try again." The humans would never give up, and neither should you. And with those words, the alien student found something within themselves. It wasn't just about conquering obstacles. It was about never backing down, no matter the pain, no matter the doubt. They were here to prove that they belonged. They were here to show that no matter how different Earth's methods were, they would not be broken. As they looked at the wall once more, they didn't see a challenge. They saw a lesson that the humans had been trying to teach them all along. The wall wasn't just an obstacle to climb. It was a test of will. And this time, the alien student was ready. The alien student stood at the base of the massive wall again, eyes narrowed with determination. The words of the instructor echoed in their mind. Get back up and try again. The humans would never give up, and neither should you. Those words sparked something deep inside, something they hadn't fully understood before. The lesson wasn't just about overcoming the physical obstacles. It was about resilience, the will to push forward when everything seemed impossible. The alien students' hands were still sore, their body battered, but they knew there was no turning back now. This was the final challenge, the one that separated those who could survive from those who couldn't. The fear that had been gnawing at their mind began to fade. Now, all that mattered was completing the task. They took a deep breath and focused on the wall ahead. The once intimidating surface seemed less daunting now. With a steady hand, they reached for the grooves in the rock. They had to be fast. Time was running out. The pressure of the task weighed on them, but they weren't about to let it stop them. The human way. The first few climbs were smooth, but as they reached higher, the wall began to fight back, just as it had before. The alien students' arms burned, their chest heaving with each breath. It felt like the wall was alive, shifting and reacting to their every movement. But this time, something inside them shifted as well. They weren't just climbing. They were proving something. The humans had shown them that strength wasn't just physical. It was mental. It was the strength to keep going when failure seemed imminent. Their muscles screamed in protest as they reached the halfway point, but they kept pushing. Their hands were slick with sweat, but they refused to stop. The lesson wasn't about getting it right the first time. It was about getting up every time you fell. Another shockwave from the wall threw them off balance. This time, they almost slipped, but with a grunt, they steadied themselves. Every inch of their body begged for a rest, but they refused. There was no room for hesitation now. The final test was right in front of them. The descent into chaos. And then, just when they thought they had made it, a sudden burst of movement from the wall sent the alien student flying. They lost their grip entirely, and for a brief moment, they felt the cold touch of gravity. Panic shot through their chest as they fell, their mind racing to find a solution. But before they could react, something else happened, something they hadn't expected. The ground beneath them shifted, and in a flash, a sturdy net of energy caught them. The alien student gasped for air as they were gently pulled upward. The weight of their failure and exhaustion lifted for a moment. The wall's trials weren't done with them yet. As they dangled in midair, they realized what had just occurred. The net wasn't just to catch them. It was to test how they adapted to failure. The humans had shown them something. Not every trial was meant to be conquered outright. Sometimes, the key was learning how to use the failure to your advantage. The alien student clenched their fists, their body exhausted but their mind clearer than ever. They had failed, but they had learned. They could feel the lessons settling in. The turning point. A deep, almost primal instinct stirred inside them. It was something that had been buried under layers of uncertainty and fear. Now, it rose to the surface. The wall was no longer something to fear. It was something to conquer, not through brute force, but with the wisdom gained through each fall. The net released them with a soft hum, and they hit the ground with a thud. They stood up, shaken but resolute. The others were watching them, their eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and admiration. The alien student had survived. No more than survived. They had learned the human way. A voice crackled through their comms, signaling the end of the test. "You did it," the instructor said, their tone less cold this time. "You passed." The alien student stood there for a moment, taking in the realization. They had completed the test, not through sheer force or skill, but through perseverance and the will to never back down. They had learned to adapt, to learn from each failure, and most importantly, to trust in their own ability to overcome. As they walked toward the others, their pride was no longer about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about understanding that sometimes the greatest strength was found in the ability to keep going, even when everything seemed impossible. The human way had taught them this, and now they carried it with them, forever changed. The lesson learned. As the alien students stood together, looking out over the vast landscape that had tested them all, they realized they were no longer just students of another world. They were now students of humanity's strength. And they had learned that sometimes, to survive, you didn't need to fight harder. You needed to fight smarter. And most importantly, never, ever give up. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the training grounds. The alien students, now bruised and tired from their previous trials, stood at the edge of the final obstacle. It was the most daunting challenge they had faced so far. A series of live targets moving across the open field, designed to push their reflexes and instincts to the limits. The humans had explained the stakes clearly. Miss the target, and you'll be caught in a trap. Hit it, and you'll earn your place among us. As they stood there, waiting for the signal, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The live ammunition wasn't just for focus, it was a way of life. The humans trained with real threats to sharpen their instincts, and it had all led to this moment. The alien students were no longer just passive observers. They were participants in the harshest of human training methods. The instructor stood before them, arms crossed, eyes cold and calculating. "Remember what you've learned," they said. "Success is earned, not given. Do not hesitate. Do not fail." The alien students exchanged nervous glances. They had seen the humans resolve, how they approached every task with a level of seriousness and skill that was almost frightening. These humans didn't just train. They trained for survival. Now, they would have to prove themselves. The first target. The signal sounded, and the field erupted into motion. The first target, a humanoid figure in motion, appeared, moving fast across the open expanse. The alien student's heart raced. They hadn't trained for this. They had trained for agility, for stamina. But this was different. This was real. This was a test of their ability to react in real time, with real consequences. The alien student's fingers tightened around the weapon. It was heavier than they expected. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was the rapid pace of the target. It was faster than they had anticipated. They raised their weapon, their hands shaking, but it was too late. The target vanished behind a structure, and the opportunity was gone. The sound of the instructor's voice echoed across the field. "You hesitated," they said. "You failed." The second chance. The alien students stood frozen for a moment, shame burning in their chest. This was a human test, not just of skill, but of mental fortitude. They had been given a second chance, but the pressure was mounting. Could they push past the mistake and try again? The next target appeared, moving even faster than the first. This time, the alien student didn't hesitate. They raised their weapon and fired in one fluid motion, but the shot missed, narrowly grazing the target. The sound of the instructor's voice cut through the air again, but this time there was a subtle change in tone. "Better," the instructor acknowledged. "But not enough. You must learn to adapt." The alien held the badge tightly, understanding the weight of those words. For the first time, they truly felt they had earned their place. The revelation of purpose. As the ceremony ended, the humans revealed one last piece of wisdom. "You've trained on Earth, a death world, because here, life is born in struggle. The universe is not kind. It is vast, dangerous, and relentless. But it's also full of opportunities for those who can stand up to it." The students listened, their earlier doubts about human methods now replaced by respect and curiosity. They began to see humanity not as reckless or chaotic, but as a species shaped by challenges. A new understanding. Later that night, as the students gathered by a campfire, one of them spoke up. "I thought humans were dangerous because of their weapons," they admitted. "But now I see, it's not the weapons. It's their will to use them, to fight no matter what." Another student nodded. "And their willingness to teach us. They didn't have to share their knowledge. They could have kept it to themselves. But they believe in allies, in unity. That's rare." The realization struck all of them. The humans weren't just training them to survive. They were teaching them how to thrive, to stand tall in the face of adversity, and to rise above challenges as a united force. The departure. As the alien students prepared to leave Earth, they felt a strange mix of emotions. They had arrived as skeptics, questioning the humans' methods and motives. Now they were leaving as allies, carrying with them lessons that would shape their futures. The instructor stood at the edge of the training grounds, watching as the alien ship prepared for takeoff. "Remember what you've learned here," they said. "And when the time comes, don't hesitate to act. The galaxy isn't waiting for you to be ready. It's waiting for you to take your place." With those words, the ship lifted off, leaving the Death World behind. The legacy spreads. Back on their homeworlds, the alien students became symbols of change. They shared the lessons they had learned, and their people began to see humans in a new light, not as dangerous outliers, but as a species worth respecting. Stories of their time on Earth spread far and wide. The legend of Deathworld training and the unyielding spirit of humanity became a tale told across the galaxy. And somewhere, on the edges of the universe, those who underestimated humanity began to take notice. The seeds of a new era. In the vastness of space, the galaxy was changing. The lessons from Earth planted the seeds of something new. A coalition of species, forged in the fires of struggle, united by a common understanding. Survival was only the beginning. To truly thrive, they needed to face the galaxy's challenges together. And at the heart of it all, the humans stood ready, their methods unorthodox, their resolve unshakable, and their message clear. The future belonged to those brave enough to seize it.